had 50-plus catches for us. Then you go on the defensive side, 75% of that production is returned. So there's not all receivers. This guy loves football, providing team blocks, taking care of ball control, all those things.
Take a deep shot here, and Isabella's waiting for it. Touchdown.
The numbers, what it means for us is there's 50 in the country.
Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please leave a rate and review. Today we'll be taking a look at the UMass Minutemen, who finished 3-9 last season and recently wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 27th. We have a special guest joining us today. Please welcome to the show, Mike Maynard, Assistant Sports Editor for the Daily Collegian, and Mike can be found at Mike C. Maynard on X. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you guys for having me. Excited to be here.
We're happy to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what led you into being interested in journalism and sports reporting?
Yeah, of course. So I started out, obviously, I have a love for sports, a love for football especially, and when looking for colleges, was kind of picking between what major I wanted to go into. I ended up starting with sports broadcasting, and it wasn't really my thing. I wasn't necessarily great at it. I can own up to that. So I ended up going into more of the behind the scenes stuff and tried out writing and transferred schools to UMass and got involved with the Daily Collegian, like you said, and I fell in love with it and been doing it for a few years now, and it's been a lot of fun.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you on the show.
UMass recently announced that they will be joining the Mid-American Conference, or MAC as most people know it, beginning in 2025 as members in all sports. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey? As they were originally, when they step up to the FBS, they were MAC members for football only from 2012 to 2015, and then they became independents while most of their other sports, I would say, were in the Atlantic 10. But now it's kind of come full circle and back to the MAC.
Yeah, I believe it was all sports were Atlantic 10 besides football, and hockey was Hockey East. But they declined an offer to become a full member of the MAC in 2014 and decided that they wanted to look for a more suitable conference, which they ended up not being able to find. And now here we are on, I believe it was end of February of just 2024. It was announced that they'd joined the MAC as a full member, including football, in July, like you said. And they've been playing a lot of MAC opponents for the football team for the past couple of years, and even this year, 5 MAC opponents. So they're used to these teams, and I think it's a good fit overall. And they were looking for a conference, like we said, for a while now. So it's good for them to have that knowledge of their opponents for the upcoming years. It's tough being an independent and having basically 12 new matchups that you have to do research for every year, and helps with your recruiting as well, with bringing in people and knowing that they're going to be part of the MAC conference. So it's definitely a good move and something that they've been looking for a while now, and now they're set to go starting in 2025.
Do you think the fan base in general is happy about it? Or, I mean, I guess I'm assuming there's probably some old school basketball fans that aren't so happy, but
I would say most fans probably of most sports besides basketball are very much on board. I would think the basketball fans definitely leaving the A10 is leaving a sour taste in their mouth, because obviously the A10's basketball competition is just much better. But it'll all work out, and I think the Max basketball is coming up, and it obviously helps the football program a lot, and that was the main focal point. And football is obviously the most popular sport in college athletics, so it brings in the money, and it's just, it makes sense at the end of the day. And I think if you're making a couple fans upset in the basketball world, but the general population is happy, that's all they can really do. So,
well, hopefully for the basketball fans, I would assume you have I don't know what the right. You're gonna make more NCAA tournaments, I would assume, right? Because you guys got to be one of the, if not the strongest, one of the strongest basketball teams in the MAC now.
Yeah, definitely. It'll probably be a good amount of MAC championships going to UMass basketball in the next couple of years. So nothing too bad about that, obviously,
Yeah.
for the fans out there.
Well, UMass brings in new offensive coordinator Shane Montgomery. He most recently was an analyst at East Carolina, but served as an OC at Buffalo, James Madison, and Charlotte, among others. Can you tell us a little bit about Coach Montgomery's offensive scheme and what we can expect here in 2024?
Yeah, I think Montgomery's scheme has a lot of similarities to previous offense coordinator Steve Casula. A lot of short passing game, getting to the sidelines, swing passes, screens, stuff like that. You saw a lot of that in the spring game and over practices. A little more vertical deep shots from the receiving core, which you didn't see a ton of with Casula. And then the biggest difference coming in with Shane Montgomery is the run game is going to be very different. It's less of like a zone run scheme, and getting guys to the outside, getting your blockers on the move, and it's more of like a gap scheme where you're kind of in between the tackles, and it's a similar offense in a lot of ways, but I think the run game is going to be the most different. But I think there's a lot of trick plays that I saw over spring. Some Andy Reid Chiefs type of plays that
Oh,
he might be
okay.
sprucing in there. So there might be some fun stuff as well. I think Shane Montgomery's going to have some fun with it. And every time I've talked to Don Brown, he's raved about how he loves how Shane Montgomery's taking over this offense. So I think it'll be a good one to watch, and a lot of similarities to last year where he's utilizing the strength of his players. They've got a lot of players over there with the Minutemen that have their specific skill sets, and Kasula tried to do that and use them to the best of his ability. And I think Shane Montgomery is going to do a similar thing.
Let's get to the position where it all starts on offense. That's the quarterback. They returned last year's starter in Tyson Pumachan, as well as Ahmad Haston, and they bring in Ryan Jankowski over from Akron. How did that quarterback room look and shape up in the spring?
Yeah, so over the spring, Tyson Pumachan didn't really get to play. He's banged up last year. Got banged up, I believe, in the second or third game of the season against Auburn. I believe it was the second game of the season, and it just really was never the same. And he came back, played here and there. It just wasn't really exactly him. I think it was a knee injury, something with one of his legs. We never really got specific clearance of exactly what it was, but he's been dealing with that. So he didn't really play all spring. He's been working out, been with the team, but hasn't been on the field, padded up, all that. So over the spring, it's been Ahmad Haston really working with the ones, getting those reps, and working as QB1. So he'll look to be the backup. But Don Brown definitely mentioned every time we had a press conference with him, every time I got to talk to Don Brown, it was Tyson Pumachan as quarterback one. There's no question. No one else is challenging him for that position as of yet, and it seems to be that way still. So Ahmad Haston has a great ability to make plays and got even in a game or two last year. So he's got that experience in this offense, which again has a new offensive coordinator, so a little different, but with similar players. And like you said, Ryan Jankowski comes in. They even brought AJ Hairston in. Both those guys made some plays over the spring, but weren't necessarily super consistent over the course of the spring, and had some fluke plays where maybe you were looking for a little bit more consistency. So I think it'll be Tyson as a quarterback one, like Don Brown keeps saying, and overall it'll be a solid unit where they can get some production if they're backups out of their backups if they need. And I think Ahmad Haston being that QB2 where he's had a year under his belt and now had a whole spring where he got to practice with the ones, he'll be set up in case of injury.
Can you tell us a little bit about the style of quarterback Ahmad Haston is for folks maybe not familiar with this game?
Yeah, I'd say he's your prototypical dual threat quarterback, very good with his legs. I believe in the spring game, he took a 45-yard read option to the house. He's very much a mobile guy that can do a lot with his legs. Think Kyler Murray, think Lamar Jackson if you're thinking NFL terms. He's very good to get out of the pocket, get him on the move and throwing on the run. He's got a strong arm as well. I think his main flaw is maybe working on that comfortability in the pocket and working in scheme and maybe getting those shots over the middle and deep balls. But he's definitely got that big play ability, that splash play ability where you're looking for a guy to make plays for you. He's that guy. It's just the consistency aspect and the pocket presence is maybe something that he can still work on. But as a quarterback too, someone that can come in and really take the top off of defense and keep them on their toes. It's definitely something that is an asset for the Minutemen to have as the QB2, especially if Tyson, might not be that guy. I mean, Tyson coming in was more of that dual threat, but coming off an injury, we didn't really see as much of him in the run game. And, Ahmad Haston is that guy where he can really get on the move and really, break tackles, extend plays, extend throws, everything like that. So he's very much a dual threat, but has the capability to throw down the field as well.
Moving on to the running game, which was a strength of the 2023 team, but recently suffered some big isn't even a good enough word for it. Huge losses in Kayron Lynch-Adams and second leading rusher Gabe Duazier into the transfer portal. What can you share with us about that situation?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it was probably the strongest point of the team in 2023. I mean, you had two guys that were dynamic runners, and Karen Lynch Adams, obviously moving on to Michigan State now, he got his starting job somewhere else, and he's set up for success. But that's going to be there's a lot of big shoes to fill there. It's a huge loss, and you got a new offense coordinator, so maybe they got some running backs now that they might think fit their scheme a little bit better, and maybe that's why they were tempted to move on, meaning Lynch Adams and DeWosier, but it's definitely going to be some big shoes to fill. They got some new guys coming in though, and even Don Brown after the spring game was saying there were two more guys that they were looking at. He didn't give names, didn't give anything, but he said that they're looking to get two more guys, and he said they'll play to their schemes. If it's a big guy and it's a power running back, they'll play to his strengths, and if it's more of an outside runner with some speed and electricity, they'll go to that. So it's definitely some big shoes to fill, and like I said, it's the strongest point of the team probably from 2023. So you're gonna see some guys that probably haven't been getting a lot of playing time anywhere or even at UMass gonna really need to step up and really look to improve a lot over this course of the offseason and going into the fall.
So they do return Jalen John and others, and also bring in Cookie Disidero from Tulsa. How did that group look this spring?
Yeah, over the course of the spring, it was really Cookie Desiderio was getting the bulk of the carries. I believe in the spring game he got, I would say, 95% of the work in the backfield. Now, that was also because Jalen John was banged up. I'm not sure if he'll be all set for the fall. I would think so. He was on the sideline, I believe, for the game, and he might have gotten a snap or two, but it was the cookie show over the spring game. He was definitely playing a lot. He, in my opinion, wasn't really showing too much. It was hard, going from Kayron Lynch Adams and Greg DeWosier to watching Cookie, who wasn't really showing as much as a runner, in my opinion. I think it's a spring game. It's hard to tell a lot, but I think there were a lot of plays where I was thinking, if they had those other two guys, something more might have happened there. So it's gonna be interesting seeing who kind of takes over the backfield when the guys do get healthy. But Cookie definitely was the main rusher over the spring, and especially in the spring game, got 95% of the carries. And I even remember they had some defensive players in at running back because the running back room has been banged up. So like I said, there's two more guys that Don Brown was saying that they're looking at right now and maybe going to bring in. So there's definitely some new guys that could be added to that room. But right now, it's definitely a question mark for the Minutemen as to who's going to lead that backfield going into the fall.
The passing game gets a boost with leading receiver Anthony Simpson returning, but they do lose George Johnson III, Mark Pope, and others. They bring in some help from the transfer portal and Frank Ladson Jr. coming from Miami, formerly Clemson, Keyshawn Brown from Duquesne, Sterling Galbin from Jacksonville State, and Jacoby James from Eastern Washington. How did the wide receivers look in the spring?
Yeah, like you hit it right on the head. Anthony Simpson's going to be huge for this offense, especially with the question marks in the running game. Anthony Simpson almost 1,000 all-purpose yards last year. I believe he was right around 900 something. So he's going to be huge to keep. Leading receiver from last year, and they got, like you said, a lot of guys to replace some talent there. And that Shea Montgomery offense is going to have some new threats. And I think we didn't see Frank Ladson, but I think he's going to be up there with the starting receivers. He's got really good size, big guy, I believe 6'3", 6'4", can really get over the top, deep threat, a lot of speed and physicality at the catch point. So he'll be a guy to look for. Keyshawn Brown, you mentioned, quick. I believe he's the opposite of Frank Ladson. He was 5'8", 150, but a quick guy, lightning quick, like lightning in a bottle. Get him the ball, short passing game, let him run. He'll probably be in the slot most of the time, but we'll see. Jaquan Gibson, who's a sophomore, has been showing out. I think last spring he had a pretty good spring, and in this spring maybe even better. He'll definitely be in the rotation there, solid at all levels of route running. Shane Robles had probably the catch of the spring game, I would say. He's coming out of Amherst High School, so right down the road, and not a name that a lot of people know about, but made a catch, I believe it was back left pylon on a fade that he just completely destroyed, mossed his defender. It was quite a catch. So there's a lot of guys in there, and Jacoby James, yards after catch guy. there's a lot of guys that they'll spruce in there. It's hard to tell who's going to be exactly the leading receiver other than Simpson. But like you said, Simpson is going to be that guy that the defenses really have to worry about going into 2024.
Who other than Simpson, who do you think will join Simpson in the starting lineup? I realize it's early, but if you had to project the starting lineup now for the receivers, who would that be?
I'd say Simpson's obviously going to be there. I'd say if Frank Ladson can get healthy, I'd say he would be a guy that the Minutemen last year, their big thing was, I think Simpson might have been the tallest receiver on the team at 6 foot. And now you have a deep threat, Frank Ladson, who's going to really be able to change the entire aspect of that offense. And I think he should be in there a good amount. I know he started at Clemson, went to the University of Miami, and you saw a lot of tape of him. I was watching him catch touchdowns from Trevor Lawrence where he was just burning past SEC defensive backs that it was like, okay, this guy can play. So I think if he can get healthy again, we didn't really see him over the spring a lot, but if he can get healthy, he should be in the starting lineup. And then, like I said, Keyshawn Brown is that slot guy, lightning in a bottle. I think get him on swing passes. I mean, Simpson's good at that type of stuff too, but get him on those swing passes, screens, short drags over the middle, and let him run, let him get yards after catch. And then Jaquan Gibson should be in a rotation. But I think those three guys mainly should be your starters, and Jaquan Gibson should be your first guy off the bench in a rotation of, a good 4. But like I said, like you said, it's early. There's a lot of guys that could make a splash, and it's hard to really tell, but it should be a good group and one of the strengths of the offense.
We've heard that UMass has big plans in this offense for the tight end. They lose Gino Campiotti to graduation, but bring in former San Jose State Spartan Dominic Mazzotti. How did he look this spring, and what can we expect from him in 2024?
Yeah, Mazzotti's been a fan favorite, I would say. He's very active on the social media. See him a lot on X or Twitter. And I've even seen him. I've been covering some of the other teams here at UMass. I've seen him at some other games. He's always showing up and supporting the school. So I think he's happy to be at UMass. He's definitely a guy that seems excited. He should be tight end 1 at the beginning of the fall. Good blocker, good route running, good hands. Definitely great hands, I would say. He made one of the best catches of spring practices. I saw it was the first spring practice of the year. He, on the last play of practice, was basically fading back, falling on his back, and just caught one right in the basket of his arm, falling backwards on the ground with the defensive back right on him. Great at finding the soft spot in zone coverage. I don't want to compare him to like a Travis Kelce, but like kind of that type of thing where you're running zone, he's going to find the soft spot and get there, and he's got the hands to make plays, and then got the yards after catch ability to break some tackles and maybe take one of the house here and there. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that should be tight end 1, and the loss of Campiotti, like you mentioned, is going to be huge if they can't have some production at that tight end room.
Yeah, I think he's someone that's going to give you guys a lot of production there at tight end. Going over to the offensive line, you guys lose 3 of 5 starters and 2 of the top backups. What did the Minutemen do this offseason to kind of shore up this offensive line, and how do they look in the spring?
Yeah, I think honestly the offensive line, if not the wide receivers, was probably the most productive portal aspect of the team that they had. Like they did a lot in the portal to make some pickups. They knew they lost some starters, made some impactful pickups that are definitely going to start in the upcoming year. Raiden Romy and Luke Payton, both transfers, seem to be the starting tackles. Romy's another guy that has been very active on social media with the whole NIL thing. He's been out there talking about getting the calzones downtown, everything like that. He's definitely a fan favorite as of now, and he'll be starting at I believe left tackle. Ethan Mottinger is a guy that's been around, and he'll be playing guard. Great downfield run blocking. And then Josh Atwood, starting center, is going to be maybe the biggest leader out of this offense besides Tyson Pumachan. He's been here for years now. And, the center of the offensive line, calling out those blitz coverages, everything that you need out of a center, he's going to do it. Don Brown's a defensive guy, but if I had to say his favorite player not on defense, it would be Josh Atwood. He raves about him all the time. I think he's going to be huge at making sure that all these guys are on the same page. Everybody knows what they're doing, knows their job, and has the best technique to do so. So I think the offensive line is going to be a strength of this offense. I think that overall it's a good unit, and they brought in some good transfers that are going to make a lot of plays and make this unit keep Tyson protected, which, he got banged up last year. They're going to need some protection for him. And I think that the Minutemen did a good job at finding those guys in the portal.
If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who would that be?
I think the obvious one would be Anthony Simpson, but I'd say breakout type season. I got to go with Frank Ladson. I think I mentioned him earlier. That size and speed combo is just something that the Minutemen haven't had in the past couple of years, and it's going to open up their offense, I believe. He's been dealing with those nagging injuries, as I've mentioned, so it all relies on him getting healthy. But if he can be healthy, the tape and the film shows that he can really get over the top and really just keep defenses honest. And they're going to need to possibly double team him, and which leaves other players open. And I think he's going to be huge for this offense to really open it up and create more play calls that are unlocked basically because of his skill set, which not a lot of receivers on this team have. I think most guys are probably 6 foot or below with, average speed. And this is a guy where he's got the size and speed combo, and he's got that physicality, like I said, at the catch point to make those contested catches. And it's going to be a huge part of this offense if he can be healthy.
Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, this unit struggled against the run in 2023, ranking 130th, but it did very well against the pass, ranking 36th. How did the defensive unit as a whole look in the spring, and what did they do this offseason to try to shore up the run defense?
Yeah, the defensive side of the ball, I think the run defense is going to be probably the weak point as of now. There could be moves made, but as of right now, I would say it's probably the weakest part of the roster on defense. There's definitely some guys that are coming back and some guys that they brought in that maybe can make some plays, but I think you're looking for a lot of production out of guys that aren't going to have a lot of playing time. I think Itanosa Rubin has versatility, play inside and out. Aaron Beckwith has been with the team for a little bit now. He's going to be in a much bigger role. Same with Chambray Jackson. They look to be the two starting defensive tackles in the run game. So we'll see if they can get those run stuffs on first and second down and set up pass rushing. And then Tyler Martin's going to be a leader. He's been with Don Brown since the Arizona days. So Tyler Martin, that linebacker, is going to be huge in the run game to make sure that he can use his leadership and experience to coach the guys up and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then Darion Craig at linebacker is another guy who made a lot of plays in the run game during the spring game, especially. Was getting in the backfield and filling some gaps. So it's going to be a unit that needs a lot of attention, and maybe even some guys. I know Don Brown maybe talked about a few guys in the portal because they do have a few open spots left. So we'll see what happens there. But like you mentioned, 130th against the run is not good, and they need to make sure that they improve there. And I think that's something that they're going to focus on over the offseason, is making sure that they're all set for the fall.
Well, speaking of this run defense, let's start with the guys up front along the defensive line. They lose NFL prospect Billy Wooden and J.B. Brown, but do return Zakudo Ngwanigu, Aaron Beckwith, and Luce Julian, and bring in Tim Grant Randall from Eastern Michigan, Itanosa Rubin from Georgia Tech, and Jalen Hudson from Wake Forest. How did that unit look this spring, and did anyone stand out to you?
Well, you mentioned Billy Wooden. He probably was, in my opinion, the best player on defense for the team in 2023. So that's going to be a huge loss for them. I think they got some big shoes to fill there. I mean, you talk about the running back room having a few losses. This Billy Wooden is the guy. He was tearing stuff up for the defense all season. So they're definitely going to have a big try, or have to try a lot to fill his shoes. And you mentioned Ngwanigu. Him and Jalen Hudson were on the edges a lot, generating a lot of pressure off the edge. So I think the pass rush should be pretty set. Don Brown also is a very blitz-heavy guy. He can dial up those blitzes, and they've got a lot of guys at the Viper position. Not necessarily linebacker, not necessarily safety, but Don Brown's got that Viper position where it's kind of an in-between guy, and those guys will definitely play a lot in the run defense as well. But the front seven is going to be, like I said, maybe the weak point of the team, but I think there's definitely some guys up front that might have the capability. They just need a little bit more time, and hopefully they get that over the summer to be ready coming up against these SEC schools that they got to play up in the coming season. But it'll be interesting to see. I think the front seven is going to be really, I don't know. It's definitely something that they've been working on, and definitely something that Don Brown has made a focal point. Like, we know that the front seven is a work in progress, and we're going to get it there. So we'll see what they do. Maybe they'll bring in some guys, like I said. So
we've talked about them a little bit, and kind of the back half of that front seven, the linebacking group. They lose second leading tackler Najee Logan to the portal and Jerry Roberts Jr. to graduation. but they returned third leading tackler Jarrell Johnson and Jalen Stewart as well as others. How did the linebacker group look this spring, and did anyone kind of step up to fill Logan's vacated role?
Yeah, I think Tyler Martin, like I said, is going to be the leader of that group. He's got that experience with Don Brown, but Jarrell Johnson, as you mentioned, he seems to be filling those bigger shoes, seems to be covering well, maybe fitting the run. And like I said, Darion Craig was definitely making some plays in the run, had a few TFLs in the spring game, and was filling run gaps pretty well over the course of the spring. Miles Turner should be getting some playing time as well. And then the Vipers, like I said, they're basically included in the linebacker room. They're going to be all over the place, filling the run, blitzing off the edge, and it's a big part of Don Brown's defense to have those guys that have that versatility. But it'll definitely be a group effort. I think there's not really one guy that's going to be standing out above everybody, but I think Tyler Martin will be the difference. He'll be the leader. He'll be the guy coaching everybody up and making sure that everybody's on the same page and making sure that they can play to the best of their ability.
The defensive backfield returns some production and leading tackler Teray Powell, Tyler Rudolph, and Isaiah Rutherford, but they do lose cornerback Jordan Mahoney to the portal and safety Juan Lua to graduation. How did that unit look in the spring?
Yeah, I'd say the DBs are definitely the strength of the defense. I mean, it's hard to not say that after saying the front seven's the weak point, but the DBs are very strong. I think you mentioned the loss of Jordan Mahoney and Juan Lua. Those guys were starters basically game in and game out, so there were some shoes to fill there. But Teray Powell and Isaiah Rutherford will be huge leaders for those new guys coming in. They've been with the team for a few years now, and we're solid starters as well. I think my guy that I noticed the most was Lake Ellis, starting at cornerback over the course of the spring, coming in from Bryan and FCS school, but he really looked good. He was covering really well, covering every receiver down the depth chart at a high level, and I think that he's set to take over as one of the better corners on this team. They have Deshaun Watkins, who's 6'4", definitely a wild card. He's got incredible length, good speed. His mechanics are a little bit here and there. I've seen him get burned a few times, but seems to be physical at the line of scrimmage, pressing, and good in the run game as well. But he'll be a wild card. I think having that size at corner is going to be interesting and huge if he can make that work. Having a 6'4" corner, like you're talking about a Richard Sherman here, could be. I won't give him that title yet, but that size and length is definitely something that you look for in a corner if you can have it. And then Jeremiah McGill and Brennan Bailey both had interceptions in the spring game. They'll both get some rotation time as well. I think the defensive backs, there's a lot of guys that can make plays. It'll definitely be a little bit of a rotation, but Isaiah Rutherford will probably lock down that corner room as CB1, and then Teray Powell definitely at safety as well. And then those Vipers, again, I hate to go back to them again, but they're in the pass game. They're covering guys, tight ends, receivers over the middle. They're huge in the DB / linebacker room. It's hard to give them an exact title.
So they did bring in a transfer from Notre Dame, Ryan Barnes. What kind of role do you expect to see from him in 2024?
He's another guy that I think will be in the rotation. Another guy with really good size, 6'2" at corner. They seem to bring in a lot of guys with size. Even Lake Ellis is a bigger guy compared to most corners, maybe. So Ryan Barnes will definitely make some plays. I think he'll get some playing time as well. He'll definitely be in the rotation. He even made a couple pass breakups in the spring game, I believe. He'll definitely be out there. I'm sure that they'll keep a good rotation. It's hard to tell in the spring. They get a lot of rotation, all these guys. So I think him and Lake Ellis will probably be out there a lot of the time. But I think Ryan Barnes is a guy that, with his size, again, like Deshaun Watkins, if he can use that 6'2" frame to his benefit, it'll be a good thing for the team.
If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
I mentioned him before. Lake Ellis just really was flashing to me. Every time I saw him, he was taking on Anthony Simpson, taking on Jaquan Gibson. It didn't matter what receiver you put against him. He was playing physical at the line, physical at the catch point, swatting away balls, picking off balls. He was all over the place and wasn't getting thrown out a lot because he was just basically draped on a defender as much as possible. And even in the 7-on-7s, when it's hard to defend for that long because you don't have an offensive line against the quarterback, he was making plays. And it's just, I think, honestly, Lake Ellis is going to be one of the superstars of this defense if he can keep up what he's doing over the spring. Now, it's very different, obviously. Spring is very different than the fall, and it'll be important for him to carry what he's done over the course of the spring into that. But I think if I had to pick one right now, he's definitely the most impressive guy I've seen.
With the spring practice now over, which position group or groups, offense or defense side of the ball, do you feel is the most concerning?
Honestly, if we're talking offense and defense, I can say one thing, but the special teams, to touch on them just for a second, that's going to be the rough point there. I think they brought in a transfer, Jacob Lurie from Vanderbilt, who hasn't been with the team over the course of the spring. He wasn't at the spring game, none of that. He wasn't with the team. But as of right now, the kicking room especially is very much a question mark, and that is definitely the weak point. I would say they need to figure that out. Now, Jacob Lurie is coming in at some point. He'll be here for the fall, so that could be your starting kicker. I know Don Brown was talking about him a little bit, how he liked him, but we'll see what goes with that. And then if we're talking just defense, offense, I would say definitely running back is going to be a room that needs to really show some things, and then the defensive line is also going to be something where we need to see what they're going to go out with and if they pick up any new players.
Overall, from the team standpoint, whether it be a kicker or whatnot, is there anything in particular that the coaches may be looking to add in the transfer portal?
Yeah, I mentioned they had a few spots open. I believe last time I talked to Don Brown was after the spring game. He said they had 9 or 10 spots open. They might have filled a couple of those by now. He did say 2 defensive linemen were in the works, one outside and one inside guy. And then they were bringing in a corner, a safety, a linebacker, and a Viper. So they're trying to fill out every spot on that defense, get another guy. He did mention 2 running backs as well, as I think I mentioned earlier, 2 running backs that will be brought in. So there's definitely a lot of positions that still could use some help, and some depth at every position is not going to be frowned upon. So there's definitely some gaps to fill. I'm sure that they'll try to fill out as many different spots as possible. But like I said, 2 D linemen, he said, and 2 running backs will be definitely on the board for what UMass looks to bring in.
What would you say the main strength of this team is?
I think on offense, it's going to be the offensive line. I think they've definitely got the guys to make things work at a high level, and Josh Atwood to really coach them up. And then defense, the defensive backs are going to be there with Isaiah Rutherford and Lake Ellis and Teray Powell. Those guys have got some veteran experience, and I think they're going to be the strength on that side of the ball.
When it comes to the recruitment of new players and retention of existing players, how has NIL and the transfer portal impacted UMass?
I think it's huge. They have the UMass has the midnight. Excuse me. UMass has the Midnight Ride Collective, which is their NIL collective controlling all that stuff. And they've definitely been a prominent factor for bringing in transfers. I mentioned Dominic Mazzotti and Braden Roby. They both are very active on social media, very active with the Midnight Ride Collective. I know even when K'Ron Lynch-Adams announced he was coming back before leaving after the first spring practice, he went on social media with the whole NIL thing, and they were doing a whole thing about him being back. Like, it's very much prominent at UMass. The Midnight Ride Collective does a great job at trying to bring in these recruits, and definitely is a prominent factor in getting them to come out to Amherst. So it's definitely huge. It's a big part of college football these days, and I think UMass is right there with everyone trying to use this to the best of their ability.
It seems like more and more, with the NIL and the transfer portal, that the head coach job is really turning more into a general manager per se. They got recruiting of transfer portal players, recruiting of freshmen. They have to worry about, or even retention or recruiting their current roster to make sure those guys don't leave. Then you have fundraising, and so it seems like maybe a lot of head coaches, it's not so much X's and O's anymore. It's more about all this other stuff. Do you kind of see that at UMass, and do they have anyone that maybe helps him out with that so that he can be more involved in the X's and O's?
I think honestly, if I had to think about UMass compared to other schools, I'd say Don Brown is more of an X's and O's guy than most. He's the second oldest coach in college football right now, and I think that plays a huge factor. Obviously, he's very much in the depths of the recruiting and all that aspects, but I think it's important to also note that he is the second oldest coach and does focus a lot on this guy's a dude, he's got his quirks, and he's wanting guys that can just play ball, and he's not worried about how much money they want or whatever, jersey numbers and NIL. He wants to make sure that these guys can play on the field at a high level. So I think compared to most schools, maybe not so much of a high interest from Don Brown and the whole NIL type of stuff, but he's definitely out there, and he's talking to all of us reporters about, we're going to look at this guy right now. We're talking about getting a kicker soon. He's definitely in it, but compared to most schools, I'd say probably not so much, if I had to guess.
So what does success look like in 2024 for UMass?
Honestly, this past year, the team won, I believe, the most games since 2018. It was either 2018 or 2019. I think, honestly, they could break that record. I think that this team is able to win 5 or 6 games, in my opinion. I think that would be a successful season for them. They've got a tough schedule. I'm not saying that they don't. I just think that this team, with the transfers they brought in, with Don Brown's mentality of getting these guys that are dudes in with the team and really working those X's and O's, I think that this is going to be a team that can compete at a high level. You saw them win a couple close games last year, and if Tyson Pumachant didn't go out early in the season, it could have been a much different outlook on the record at the end of the season. And I think with him being healthy and this offensive line that they have really being bolstered up and the weapons and everything like that, this team could win 5 or 6 games, and I think that would be a successful season for them in the end.
Well, we've kind of covered a little bit of everything, offense, defense, even a little bit of special teams. Is there anything that we haven't talked about with this 2024 UMass football team that you'd like to share with us?
I don't know if there's anything that we didn't talk about. I think it'll be a really interesting year. I mean, it's the one year they know that they're joining the MAC, but they're not in the MAC yet. So I know Don Brown was saying that he was telling all of his players, he had them for a meeting, and he was saying basically, you know what? I know everybody's talking about the MAC. Everybody's talking about the MAC. We got a season in front of us. And he was saying, they're just going to worry about now, and whatever comes in the future comes in the future. They're not going to worry about that. So it's going to be an interesting season. Got a lot of MAC matchups coming up, so we'll see how they can compete against those teams and what they look like and how they match up. And then obviously they'll get a little bit of scouting done for the upcoming seasons, and it'll be really interesting. Like I said, they have a chance to compete and build off a successful 2023 season. I think coming off of seasons where they were winning one game, this past season was a step in the right direction. And Don Brown was definitely, I believe I asked a question in the last press conference with Don Brown where I said, you had a step in the right direction last year, and he cut me off. He went, you know what? Yeah, we did. We had a step in the right direction. I was like, all right, yeah, okay. So it's definitely, the team is going in the right direction. Like I said, they got the MAC thing coming up. They got a lot of recruits coming up, the NIL stuff. Everything's going in the right direction for UMass, and they're looking to basically build on what they've been building on. I think they should compete at a high level, even though they have a tough schedule coming up this season in 2024.
Well, thanks again, Mike, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.